Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nick Hinman. I'm the band director at Chaparral High School. And welcome to the 2021 CMEA Clinic and Conference. Thank you so much for attending. The theme this year is Stronger Together, which seems a little ironic because we're not actually in person together. But I think what that really means is that we can all be more thankful when we're finally able to get back together. And certainly we've all had to lean on each other a lot to get through this crisis that we are in. So I'm so thankful that you attended. Thanks for checking this out. Today, we're going to talk about failure, teach them how to fail. Mostly our students, but also us. I'm hopeful that this presentation will give you some tips and tricks on leading students and ourselves from failure to success. Some objectives for today, hopeful to provide some levity, even through a computer screen. Humor is the best medicine, right? I would also like to hopefully provide some inspiration for all of you. Some of us may be in need for maintenance or repair of our own mental states, or maybe some inspiration to repair our students' mental states. And I'm hopeful that you'll have some ideas after this presentation. And then finally, hopefully you can leave us some thoughts or ideas to bring more energy and passion to your job, which needs it now more than ever. Because I'm a music nerd, I opted to put this entire presentation in sonata allegro form. So we're gonna do the exposition next. Some of you may be asking, wait, you want kids to fail? Sure do. Let me explain why. Failure may seem like a faulty idea, but where did it come from? It came from a need for self-care. Band directors are notoriously not great at taking care of ourselves. So about 10 years ago, I became a long distance runner, and I started to learn the more experience that I gained that in the course of a running cycle, when you were training for a race, you were supposed to have at least one bad run. I kind of liken that to a concert cycle. At some point, your long run is going to be a full run through of whatever piece you're working on. So in the course of a race cycle, in theory, you should have at least one long run that doesn't go according to plan. Kind of the same thing with any of the music classes that we teach that involve a group ensemble performance. A couple years after that, I did this dumbbell workout program called Live to Fail. And I feel like it's the first time ever in my life where I had actively been encouraged to fail, which I thought was interesting. I'm not the most naturally athletic or muscular guy, but I wanted to try out this dumbbell thing. Whole idea being that you work your muscles to failure and then they recover over the course of the next week until you work out the same muscle group, which made me start to wonder, could this be applied to teaching music? So next question to me would have been, why this idea? Well, because I have a lot of negative self-talk. It's a characteristic of mine. Not really a whole lot I can do about it. I don't think, other than try to shut it up. Do the best I can, but I'm not always successful. And I'm also someone who suffers from a lot of self-doubt. Just in general, I always believe that there's something that I could be doing better, and I question the methods that I use. So this means, this presentation is a means of me rumbling with vulnerability, which is my next bullet point. A book by Brené Brown called Dare to Lead. She is an author who will make far more than any of us ever will, who has gone around the country writing books and giving talks about vulnerability in general, something that us as Americans are not always the best at. Something I was finding is that a profession that I came to because of my heart was getting dominated by my head. So I was looking for balance, essentially. So throughout the presentation, I'm going to have a couple of quotes from Brené Brown and a couple other sources as well that are relevant to the information I'm presenting. Brené here says, to be the person who we long to be, we must be vulnerable. We must take off the armor, put down the weapons, show up, and let ourselves be seen. First year teachers, second year teachers, 20th year teachers, this is good advice for all of us, I think. Another quote that she says here, there is absolutely no innovation without failure. As I tried to build a band program, I had to remind myself of that. If I want to inspire kids, I have to rumble with my own failures. Take off my armor, don't be so defensive about them, put down the weapons, let it in, accept it, and keep showing up. I had a particularly rough fall 2019, and I was telling my band booster parents that I felt like one of those dolls that you punch down and it like gets back up. You know, our careers kind of feel like that sometimes. And all of this led me to question, what were some of the characteristics of my favorite teachers? They were passionate and patient. They pushed me to be better. They were good listeners. They were knowledgeable, and they encouraged me to take risks. But most of all, they made me feel successful by allowing me to fail. I started thinking about that concept of failure. Same for you? I would imagine some of us, or all of us, would come up with some sort of similar list of characteristics of our favorite teachers. And despite the pandemic, despite the fact that most of us are teaching through a computer screen right now, we can be that favorite teacher right now. Part of that is because if we encourage our students to fail, they have more of a reason to trust us. What does this look like? Let me be clear. I am not encouraging kids to fail as an end result. Quite the opposite, in fact. But kids need to understand along the way that they will fail, they should expect to fail, and they need to fail. It's part of the growth process. You have to learn to walk before you run. That's an analogy I use with my students all the time. Moments of failure are not permanent. Teenagers, everything's very dramatic. Everything's the end of the world. And we just have to remind them, listen, this failure is not permanent. It's something that happened to you. You will recover. It'll be okay. And to put it in a music context, if they always sound good in the practice room, they are practicing the wrong things. And of course, I had to put a baby picture in there because who doesn't love pictures of babies? I have some mentor's wisdom about failure that I figured I should share with all of you, just little nuggets of wisdom that I can take absolutely no credit for. Dr. Eric Johnson, who is the associate music education professor at CSU, when he was getting his master's at CU Boulder, when I was an undergrad, he once told me, and it stuck with me ever since, if you are experiencing discomfort, it's because you are growing. So anyone feeling that way? I feel that way every year. You're not alone. Even the best bands don't have a great rehearsal every day. I think I went and observed Steve Martin as a second-year teacher. He was still teaching middle school band back then, but he had just taken a group to CMEA, and I looked up to him and the way that he ran his program, and I went, oh man, I want to do something like that someday. Steve Martin's a wise man. Go have a conversation with him. And then I got my master's at the Vanderbilt College of Music in Chicago. Dr. Robert Sinclair is the choir director there. He was the graduate dean when I graduated. So I got a lot of FaceTime with him that summer, which was awesome. And he told me once, we were just talking conducting shop. He said, when I'm conducting, I just listen to the ensemble and evaluate what I hear. If I don't like what I hear, I tell the ensemble to change something. And for a textbook overthinker like me, that was mind-blowing because it was so simple. I'd never heard it put that way before. And ever since then, my teaching has changed. So hopefully any one of these pieces of, or these quotes, pieces of wisdom from my mentors could help you. All right, development time. We're gonna talk about teaching Gen Z how to fail. With social media, SEL, growth mindset, and a pandemic in mind, the approach has to change. But it starts with the first step of getting to know our kids with some Gen Z context. Many of us have probably grumbled about, these kids are fragile, these kids have no grit, these have no blah, 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 blah. Like put all those grumbly feelings aside. Social media is damaging kids' self-esteem, self-image, and mental health. I started teaching the year that the iPhone came out, and it has been very clear to me the way that kids in general have evolved since then. They were much more well-adjusted and willing to take risks and excited then than they are now. If you need some more proof of this and you're mindlessly scrolling Netflix in the next couple of weeks, go check out The Social Dilemma. It's a documentary style movie. They have some staged elements to it, but they're interviewing like creators of Facebook and Instagram and all those things. And these people are denouncing social media, essentially, talking about the damage that it's doing to us. I think it will inform your teaching when you watch it. One of the concepts I like to talk with my students about, and I'm going to introduce to you, is what I call the highlight reel. We all, us included, log into social media and everyone's bragging about how awesome their life is. I did this amazing thing. I went on this amazing trip. I accomplished this thing. And when you start to see that, it starts to pile on you after a while and you go, man, like my life sucks. And I think kids go through that as well. Conversely, social media also has what I like to call fail reels or blooper reels, if you will. These kids are walking around saddled with the fear that they're going to fall down the stairs at school and someone's going to catch it on their phone and post it to social media, and they're going to be the butt of a joke that goes viral. Kids are nervous about these things, and there's nothing that we can do to control it. So we have to teach them how to deal with it, how to live with it, maybe is a better word. Kids don't inherently understand that those highlight reels took a lot of failures to get there. I oftentimes show my students a picture of an iceberg. The part of the iceberg that's above the water, that's the success, if you will, the highlight reel part. But the iceberg's way bigger underneath the water. That's the part that nobody sees. So because of this culture that the kids are living in, there's a ton of pressure put on them to achieve high. Some of them put tons of pressure on themselves. I certainly was that kid. Some of them get pressure from the adults in their lives, us included. We're trying to, put out the best possible performance we can. I think we have the hardest job in all of education because we put our work out on display for people to judge, essentially, every single time, every 9 weeks or so, 18, somewhere between 9 and 18 weeks. And then finally, they get, and this is, I think, where their lives are harder than they were when we were kids as teenagers. They get more pressure from their peers. And it may not be direct pressure, but the fact that any of their lives could be filmed at any given moment puts a lot of pressure on them. Keeping up with the Joneses. I grew up in a suburban school. I teach in a suburban school, and the keeping up with the Joneses thing is certainly a reality in the suburbs. I cannot speak to urban or rural schools, but keeping up with the Joneses is a real thing in our label-obsessed and status-driven society. These kids are competing amongst each other to gain access to college, and they're stressed about their GPA and what honor cord am I going to earn at graduation, et cetera, et cetera. What yard sign can I put in my yard for this thing that I accomplished or this group that I'm part of, okay? Keeping up with the Joneses puts a lot of pressure on kids. And then another thing that they need to know is that there's no easy button or Wikipedia fast track solution to learning music. It doesn't work that way in our class. They need to know that everything in our lives cannot be a highlight. But the more things change, the more they stay the same. I'm going to put on my college professor hat and do a little quick review of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. In our classes, I sincerely hope none of us are tasked with taking care of physiological needs of kids in our classes. Okay, in theory, they're all showing up to our classes with at least most of those needs taken care of. And hopefully, if not, your school has the resources to help take care of that. In our classes, safety has to be the first priority. Kids want to feel safe in our classes, and that's even more pronounced in this era of school shootings. Kids want to feel safe in our classes. Then beyond that, they need to feel like they are loved and they belong. That is something that we can be very influential with in our programs that they sign up for year after year. This leads to a higher esteem of the kids, both self-esteem and peer esteem. You know, they gain status, they gain recognition, they gain respect from their peers by accomplishing things. And then ultimately it leads to self-actualization. Now, another author that I like to read is Simon Sinek. He's an inspirational speaker. He likes to talk about business types of things and leadership in general. He wrote this book, Start With Why, and he said, there are only two ways to influence human behavior. You can manipulate it or you can inspire it. So for us as conductors, are we manipulating our students or are we inspiring our students? And I think that inspiring is the far better solution. So with regard to failure, modeling failure needs to come from the top down. We need to model failure. How many of you have ever seen a conductor make a mistake, cut the group off, and blame it on the ensemble? Probably all of us, right? Conducting is hard, let's be honest, but none of us is perfect. Acknowledging your mistake allows the ensemble to acknowledge theirs. It makes it safe for them. And especially when we're dealing with kids, when they need that safety, us modeling that makes it safer for them to do the same. Kids look at us like we're gods. Sometimes we think we are, sometimes we act like we are, but it's still healthy to remind them that we are human. You know, we see these kids at the grocery store and they look at us like we have two heads. And then you go, no, I'm a real person. You know, I get up in the morning and eat breakfast and I take a shower and I do all these normal human things that you do as well. I don't just live at school. Doing that in the context of your classroom makes you more human. Does that mean we strive to make mistakes on the podium? Heck no. We are the model, so we have to be as close to perfect as we can be, but we're gonna make mistakes because we're human, so acknowledge them when we make them. You can essentially model failure while you model preparation. It is possible to do both, with the idea that there's very, very few failures because of how prepared you are. This is going to be a kind of a throwback to the teaching style that most of us experienced when we were in school. Shame is the most corrosive thing in a work culture, as it changes the belief of who we can be and what we can do better. Brené Brown from Dare to Lead. In the context of shame, how we handle failures matters, okay? All of us, I'm sure, at some point experienced some sort of shame. Maybe not directed at us, but directed at someone else in the ensemble. Someone gets berated for making a mistake. Gone are those days where we can do that. If kids fear failing, it's debilitating and counterproductive. The wrath of God approach, when we're on our fancy box that we stand on called the podium, it belittles kids and it's embarrassing. And we all remember what it's like being a teenager. Our number one fear was getting embarrassed in front of our peers. And if you don't believe that, go to any 8th grade classroom for proof. It's the hardest thing about teaching 8th graders, to become so self-aware. I prefer to think of failures as learning opportunities, and I explain that to my students, and it makes it okay then. Assume that the kids are giving their best effort. And let's be honest, there are times where the kid's best is not what we are looking for, but we're still teaching humans and we have to treat them as such. So when we're on the podium, our demeanor should be calm or enthusiastic, and serious works as well. but not always. If you're always serious, it's not engaging for the kids. And certainly at all costs, you've got to avoid negativity. Is it a failure that you can laugh off if something happens? I'm, conducting ensemble, 2, ready, and we have a flamed attack. Is this something we can laugh off? Cool. Laughter is the best medicine. And if you can get the kids focused back again one more time, it's great when those types of things can happen. If it's a moment that you can't laugh off, keep your cool, because it means they can keep theirs as well. Don't berate the ensemble because they did something you didn't want them to do. Some examples I have on the next slide include, let's say, imagine you're conducting during a critical rehearsal, or maybe an intense rehearsal, maybe not like the rehearsal right before a concert. Let's call it 2 weeks before a concert. We're still in teaching mode and not like, oh God, we have to actually sound good mode. We play something, cut it off. How was that? The kids are honest. They'll tell you if it was bad. But then rather than them waiting for you to tell them what to do, you ask them, what can we do better? And allow them to be the problem solvers. And then when that discussion's done, look at them and say, let's not do that again. It's that simple. You don't need to berate them. I can't believe you did this. That was so terrible. La, 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 la. Don't do that. Just tell them, hey, that wasn't great. Don't do that again. It's that simple. Sometimes it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And if you can't, say it with a smile on your face. Smiling matters to kids, especially when we're doing music. If I'm more frustrated and irritated in the moment, however, and a technique that I've used is I'll ask, was that your best? And I do a lot of call and response teaching. I'll talk about that a little bit later. The kids will yell, no, because they know that's what I want to hear. And they know that it's the honest truth as well. And then I'll look at them and say, then make it your best. Be better. And they do it. It's that simple. You don't have to demand any more of them. Just make it your best. They are in our classes and they want to please us. So they're going to put the effort in. If you have a disruptive student, calmly address the students that you need to address. In private is best, not in front of the entire class. We mentioned before, teenagers don't want to get embarrassed in front of their peers. And Dr. Tim says, praise publicly, criticize privately. It's great advice. If they're not getting it, quote unquote, and you're beating a dead horse, use the word yet. Example would be, we just haven't gotten it yet. Put this away, we'll look at it tomorrow. It implies that, it's okay that we didn't get it today. So Samuel Beckett is an Irish playwright that I found a great quote about failure. He says, ever tried, ever failed? No matter, try again. Fail again, fail better. It's almost like he's the original Yoda in a sense. I'd be curious to know if George Lucas read any Samuel Beckett before he wrote Star Wars. As far as allowing the ensemble to fail, that's an idea that I'm presenting here. We can't control anything but how good our groups are. So why would we allow them to fail? It seems like a stupid idea. But let me ask you, do you let your group make mistakes? Because for the longest time, I didn't let my group make mistakes. What do we mean by that? Well, let's talk about mistake practicing. I got out of college. I was bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, ready to go make a difference. I'm hopeful that I did. But what we would do back then, or individual practicing, I was taught you practice until you make a mistake, you stop, you fix it, and you start over, okay? And then you do that, hopefully the next time you get a little further, and then you get a little further, and then you get a little further. Another example of this could be the 10 penny method. You put 10 pennies on your stand, cross one across the stand every time you play it wrong. If you mess it up, all the pennies go back. But eventually you play it till you can't get it wrong, essentially. These methods are good for individual practicing, but in my young and uneducated mind, I used those as ensemble rehearsal techniques as well. So stopping every time someone makes a mistake is not very effective because the ensemble gets frustrated. So allow them to fail in rehearsal so that they don't in performance. Let me ask you, have you ever cut your group off because it's fallen apart? We all have. But let me ask you this, have you ever not cut off your group when it's fallen apart? It's very patience testing and hard to do. But I have a story about this with my marching band. My first year at Chaparral, we were doing a rep of some section of the show, and it was a bleeping disaster. There were 4-letter words flying on the podium, and I'm like white knuckling the scaffolding, just like, oh, I can't handle it. And a staff member said, don't cut them off. And I learned a really important lesson then. And that was this. They can sink or they can swim, but they'll learn to swim if you let them. And by the end of that rep, somehow they were back together. I could not tell you how they did it. And that's in an outdoor setting. In theory, in an indoor setting, they should be able to do the same thing. What we have to do is teach them to fail better. So Brene Brown says to choose courage over comfort. I just talked about teaching the ensemble to fail. I'm going to teach individuals to fail now. Okay, not teach them. How about allow them to? Do we teach, or do you teach as part of a team? Do you have private instructors that can fix individual errors? Most of us don't. Budget situations are scary right now. And that's myself included. So what that means is we are also error detectors, both in and out of rehearsal. It also means we have a lot on our plates. Because we perform for audiences, we have to be product driven, but that doesn't mean that our assessments have to be. We're teaching people, not just in tune, in tone, in time. Those are a byproduct of the things that we do in our assessments. So as far as formative assessments go, fundamentals, excerpts, solos, etc., they should be process driven. If they are not perfect, there's opportunity for learning. The kids are going to get all anxious every year. My newest batch of kids, oh, I'm so anxious. I just sent a playing test to Mr. Hinman. And I tell them, if it sucks, that's okay right now. In the end, it's not okay if it sucks, but right now that's okay, because I listen to the video and I go, you need to do this and this better. Your articulation's wrong there. The rhythm is a little bit off. You're dragging just a little bit, those types of things. You give them those pieces of feedback, and that's the opportunity. That's where the growth happens. If a kid fails in a practice video, let them do it again. Why would we punish a student for wanting to make something better? Submitting practice videos for our students requires courage over comfort. And that's something that I remind my students of all the time. Be courageous. So those formative assessments, if they're process driven, turn into a great, or better, we'll call it better, summative assessment in a concert or performance. So now let's circle back to Gen Z. We're going to do a little bit more digging onto social media. I mentioned before that I started teaching the year that the iPhone came out. So this generation of kids has grown up with smartphones and social media, staring at screens all the time. So they're very ill prepared in a lot of ways to deal with society. It is how they socialize on social media. They spend time texting each other and not talking to each other. We can't fight their participation in social media, certainly not when they're not in our classes, but we can guide them through the ups and downs that social media provides. Social media has made our lives easier in some ways. It's easier to communicate. It's also harder to communicate. Ironically, there's an interesting dichotomy there. The students will follow our model though. Schooling is about socialization. And in this day and age, we all use some sort of digital way of communicating. So we need to model how to communicate. And we also have to train kids how to interact digitally as well. Maybe don't get in an argument with your section mate about whatever it is. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had the last several years telling kids, you should not have texted that. This needs to be a face-to-face conversation. So we're teaching kids how to communicate. And then the students will follow our model. Just in our classrooms alone, if we model success by doing something as simple as being comfortable in our own skin, wearing something weird to school, flying your freak flag once every now and then, letting the kids see what you're interested in, it teaches them to do the same. They're so scared to be themselves on social media because they're afraid that people are going to judge them. So, and then on top of that, if we safely model failure, they will feel better about their failures as well. Now let's talk about social emotional learning. I'm going to be honest with you. I had not even heard of this until the summer of 2020 when I was leading up to this school year, trying to figure out what the heck I was going to do teaching in a pandemic. So the next several slides have paraphrases and quotations from a group called the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. They're called CASEL. I will call it SEL for short. You may have heard of SEL in the recent past, but what is it? This is a direct quote from them. SEL is the process through which all young people and adults develop healthy identities, manage emotions and achieve personal and collective goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain supportive relationships, and make responsible and caring decisions. The long story short on that is the old buzzword called the whole child. I think that's what education was focused on when my generation was in school. We're trying to teach the kids to be the whole child. Do we want our programs, do we want our concerts to be great? Yes, but we're teaching the entire child. I tell my kids, I want to train them to go be leaders when they go out into the world, whatever that looks like for them. So what are the components of SEL? First one, self-awareness, understanding one's own emotions, thoughts, and behaviors. An example of this would be a kid understanding and knowing their strengths or limitations and having a sense of confidence and purpose. I figured out pretty quick that I was bad at baseball because I couldn't hit the dang ball when it was on a tee. So I stopped playing baseball. Then I found the trumpet and was like, oh, I'm kind of good at this. I was getting self-aware. So in our classrooms, we can help kids become more self-aware by building student leadership roles based on kids' interests and strengths. If you have a kid that's really good in front of the students, let them run warm-ups every now and then, or let them be the drum major. or maybe they should audition first, but or someone who really likes to organize, that compulsive organizer, let them be your librarian and they can help collect music or take it out of the sight reading folders or, whatever you need to do. Okay. Find ways to celebrate your kids' strengths. Let's talk about self-management, managing one's own emotions, thoughts, and behaviors. An example here, a kid understanding delayed gratification, so important in our classes. That easy button that I mentioned before does not exist for us. A kid that's good at managing their stress, or a kid that feels motivated to accomplish goals, either personal or collective. That kid that stays late to practice, that's a kid that's self-managing really well. In our classrooms, we can set behavioral expectations and direct the energy in the room in the right direction. Rather than berate the kid that's interrupting your class because he's ADD, find a way to allow that kid to exist in a positive light. Let him get up at a concert and read a program note. Or if that percussionist is off task, ask him to come up on the podium and tell him what he hears when the band plays something. At the very least, you're not yelling at him. He gets to do something. That's why he's acting out anyway. And then after that, he gets to see how hard your job is. And maybe he's more likely to behave better because you didn't berate him. He still got a little bit of attention and he figured out how hard your life is on the podium. Just some ideas here. Okay, let's talk about social awareness, which is understanding perspectives and empathizing with others, including those from diverse backgrounds and contexts. I think this is particularly important as the ethnic and demographic makeup of the United States starts to change. Okay, we just need to be able to have conversations about maybe a disagreeing of opinions. That's clearly a problem in the United States right now. I think if we teach this generation how to do that, we can solve a lot of those problems. It may take a while, but it's possible. So an example would be a kid feeling compassion for others, recognizing others' strengths, understanding behavioral norms. I had this family a couple of years ago. I had to train them. They were hooting and hollering at the end of a concert. That's not how you behave here. This is not an athletic event. It's not a marching band show. This is a concert. There's a different set of behavior expectations here. Or expressing gratitude. So in my classroom, we celebrate the kids for who they are and their successes too. That kid that has a hard time getting to class on time, rather than berate them every time, the time they finally get to class, their instruments out, they're ready to go when the bell rings. Hey, thanks for getting here on time. You should do that every day. You're focusing on the positive thing that they did instead of berating them for the negative thing that they did. Something else I do is what I like to call Thankful November. The month of November, every student in my class says something that they're thankful for, which is particularly good when you've got, students that may not have a lot of stuff, if you will. Being thankful for your family or being thankful for the clothes you have, something as simple as that is a powerful thing. And the kids can make themselves vulnerable. Talking about rumbling with vulnerability for Brené Brown, these kids don't want to do those types of things. Relationship skills. Establish and maintain healthy and supportive relationships among diverse individuals and groups. An example of this would be a kid being a clear communicator, a good listener, someone who's collaborative, or able to resolve conflict. For me, these are typically who I make my new member liaisons, if you will. They're the students that are in charge of recognizing the new members and finding the strengths of our new members. In the classroom, I like to catch kids setting a great example. I tell all of my students that everyone is a leader. Some of them believe that the only version of a leader is the person who has the loudest voice, the person who has the biggest personality. And I tell them, no, every one of you is a leader. That kid that shows up to rehearsal on time with their pencil out, their instruments out, they're ready to go. They sit with good posture. I recognize those kids. Susie did a great job watching the conductor on that retard. And then when you're positively pointing out the behavior that you want the rest of your group to do, they're going to start doing it the same way too, because they want that same recognition. These kids want to be positively recognized. So that develops relationship skills when the kids realize that every single person in the class is going to get recognized for something. The last component of this is responsible decision-making, where students are making caring and constructive choices about personal behavior and social interactions across diverse situations. I liken this to the leaders in our programs. These kids are able to evaluate benefits of consequences of decisions for personal, social, or collective well-being. In the classroom, these are your council members. These are the kids that stay late. These are the kids that show up early. Ask yourself, is a kid mature enough to lead others? Are they mature enough to have discussions about where their program is going? If they are, they're probably a responsible decision maker, at least in your program, maybe not in their other classes. So how do Maslow and SEL connect? Well, they each have 5 components, but it's not linear. It's a little messier than that, just kind of like the learning process is. So hopefully none of us are having to take care of Maslow's physiological needs. My hope is that all of our students are coming to class with those needs met. So as far as our standard teacher responsibilities, we start with the safety needs of our students, and the connection between Maslow's safety needs and SEL's components include the self-awareness and the self-management. I like to connect these to the allow the individual to fail idea. We allow the individuals to fail, they become more self-aware, they become more, they manage themselves better. They behave better in class because they know that it's okay if they make a mistake. Then the next tier down on this, Maslow says love and belonging and esteem are the next two components. The SEL components that I believe are connected to that include social awareness and relationship skills. Those are what I like to call the allow the ensemble to fail, are connected to the ensemble to fail idea, okay? When the kids see that all of their peers are failing, they, on occasion, and it's still a positive atmosphere, they build relationships with them. They can take their armor off about being vulnerable and go, oh, that kid screwed him note up too. I don't have to be so worried now. And then eventually the top of each of these pyramids would be the self-actualization for Maslow and the responsible decision-making for SEL. Okay, I got to move on to growth mindset. If you didn't know, Stanford psychology professor Carol Dweck has pioneered research on growth mindset. She was curious why some students grow and others don't. And she was basically questioning, does praise have an effect on how kids grow? And does how we praise kids have an effect? She discovered what she titles them fixed mindset and growth mindset. And what she discovered was that praise and how we do it matters a lot. I'm gonna show you this video.
So check this out. Carol Dweck and her colleagues wanted to look into the impacts that praise had on children's development. So what they did is they took over 400 fifth grade students from all across the nation, and they did a really simple yet interesting study. Here's how it went down. They gave all the kids a really, really easy nonverbal IQ test. There were 10 questions, and at the end of the test, they praised all the children in one of two ways. The first group was praised for their intelligence. So they said, wow, great job. You must be really smart at this. Now, the second group was praised for their effort. So they said, wow, great job. You must have worked really, really hard at this. Now, this is a really subtle difference, but the impact it had is incredible. So after praising the kids and getting them divided up into the two groups, they gave them all an option for their next test. The first option was, hey, this next test is going to be a little bit harder, but it's going to be a great opportunity to learn and grow. Now, the second option was, this next test will be similar to the first, and you will surely do well on it. Now, the interesting thing is, out of the group that was praised for their intelligence, 67% of them chose the easier option, while 92% of the kids who were praised for their effort chose the harder test. This is unbelievable to think about, how just the subtle difference in the way that they were praised had such an impact. Carol Dweck explains why this happens.
The child or adult hears, oh, you think I'm brilliant and talented. That's why you admire me. That's why you value me. I better not do anything that will disprove this evaluation. As a result, they enter a fixed mindset, they play it safe in the future, and they limit the growth of their talents. Whereas focusing on the strategies they use, the way they're stretching themselves and taking on hard tasks, the intense practice they're doing, those are the kinds of things that say to a child or an older athlete, it's about the process of growth. As a result, they don't feel, oh, if I make a mistake, you won't think I'm talented. They think, oh, if I don't take on hard things and stick to them, I'm not going to grow.
Next, Dweck and her colleagues gave all the kids a really, really difficult test. It was one that they would surely fail, but they wanted to look at how the different kids attacked this challenge. Dweck noticed that the group that was praised for effort worked harder, longer, and actually enjoyed this test more than the group that was praised for their intelligence. This group got really frustrated with this test and had the tendency to give up early. After this artificially induced failure round, all of the kids were given a third and final test. Now, this test was the same level of difficulty as the first one, but check out the results. The group that was praised for their intelligence actually did worse on this test than the first one. Their average score actually dropped by 20%, while the group that was praised for their effort did significantly better, raising their average score by nearly 30%. This is a 50% difference in performance that was caused by a few subtle differences in the way that they were praised. This study shows how praise can either make or break a child's development. I mean, we all do it. We all want to be positive with the children we work with. So teachers, coaches, parents are always looking for ways to support their kids and tend to praise them quite a bit. So we need to look at research like this and realize, okay, praise is a good thing and there's nothing wrong with being positive, but we need to be very careful about praising someone's intelligence or abilities and focus more on the process and the effort that they put forth. I think this is a pretty easy fix that will help us develop growth mindset.
So, praise the effort, not the ability. All right, time for the recapitulation. I'm gonna do some review. As far as the summary goes, with the social media stuff, what we talked about, I threw a lot of information at you, so I kind of feel like we should review just a little bit. Social media is damaging kids' psyches. We have to find a way to counter it. The highlight reel or blooper reel, either or, puts undue pressure on kids from their peers, making them less willing to take risks. And teaching digital communication is now part of our job description, like it or not. As far as Maslow goes, this is not new information, but maybe the connection that it has to SEL is. In our classes, kids' physical and emotional safety leads to a sense of love and belonging, which, side note about the love and belonging thing, kids that come from broken homes are in particular need of that right now. And even more so if potentially they may be suffering from financial difficulties because of the job market right now. So really lean into that despite how stressful our lives are right now. But that sense of love and belonging leads to a higher esteem, both self-esteem and peer esteem. And eventually the kids become more self-actualized. But it's good for us to all remember that it starts with safety. A summary, the sequel, dun, dun, dun. As far as SEL is concerned, this is probably new info for some of you, but in our classes with the safe atmosphere that Maslow's hierarchy requires, kids can develop their self-awareness and their self-management, what I like to call me concepts. The kids' concept of themselves and their understanding of themselves can be developed in our classes by the things that we do. Then the next step for that would be the kids becoming more socially aware and developing their relationship skills, concepts I like to call we concepts. The kids can't focus on we if they're not able to focus on me just yet. And then finally, with SEL at the top of the pyramid, if you will, responsible decision-making is the end of the road. With regard to growth mindset, research shows that students are more likely to grow and work harder when they are praised for the effort rather than the ability. So when they haven't gotten it yet, instead of saying, you're so good at your instrument, you'll get it eventually, try saying, I can see how hard you're trying. We'll get there. We're just not there yet. Use the word yet. Inspires them to keep practicing. All right, last few techniques that work for my teaching. Let's talk about some failure teaching methods that I like to use. By the way, most of this has been in deference. This presentation has been in deference to other people that are far smarter than I am. These are not necessarily original ideas, but these are things that have worked for me. So please feel free to try them. You're welcome to plagiarize any of my stolen ideas. There's not an original idea I have that's mine in here. So as far as failure teaching is concerned, when you teach a new concept, teach them the wrong way first. Then you've already allowed them to fail. I like to use a note length exercise. So I do a lot of call and response in my teaching. I say 4 notes, you say 4 notes. Follow me. Ready? And dot, 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 dot. Now, da, 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 da. Let's pause there. Okay, so here's the deal, everybody. That first dot, dot, dot thing that I said or had you do that one more time. Ready, go. Yeah, that's how we don't want to articulate those notes. I just wanted to tell you how to not do that. And then already you've let them fail and they're like, oh, okay, I just won't do that again. It's that simple. And they did it together. So that feeling of togetherness makes them go, oh, I already failed. It's okay. They're less stressed out already. Another technique I like to use, break the stressful mood of a rehearsal by letting the kids pick a note and play together. Only do it for 2 or 3 seconds and do it with the caveat of you have to play with a great sound. Unless maybe it's beginning band, because beginning bands like to honk, let's be honest. But they feel better. You're leading up to whatever stressful testing window of time it is during the year. Do that. Helps the kids release their stress. Send them videos of you playing instruments that are not your primary instrument. Demonstrate that you struggle too. That iceberg analogy that I used earlier. What they see is what we're doing above the water. They don't see all the under the water stuff. So pick up the bassoon and play something. It makes them laugh. It endears them to you. It makes you more human to them. And then Janice Matsky, you have the credit for this one. Have them play a polished chorale, but give them all permission to play one note wrong. It teaches them that every note matters, every player matters, and that we should be striving to get as close to perfect as possible. As far as teaching philosophies that I use, I believe that call and response teaching is the best teaching. it contributes to that sense of love and belonging in your classroom because they feel like they're having a conversation with you. It's not you stop, I tell you what to do. I ask you a question, you talk to me back. When I have a conversation with you as a friend, it's not me talking the whole time. At least it shouldn't be. That's not a healthy friendship. So call and response teaching is the best. Why? A silent classroom isn't necessarily an engaged classroom. And these kids need to talk. You want to know why? Because they go home and they text each other all night long and they're not actually using their voices. Okay. So we can teach them that socialization of talking to peers in class, which promotes social awareness. An example of this, we just played something, 2, 3, 4, off. Okay. Tell your neighbor one thing you did well. Then you're developing their sense of pride, their sense of confidence. I did this thing well. This was good. And then when you know you're going to do it a second time, next thing. Okay. Tell your neighbor something you need to play better. They talk about what they need to play better. Hey, guess what? They all failed together. They all know what they need to get better at. And then they're in the frame of mind of, I need to fix this the next time we play this. And then you do it. And it's a win-win for everybody. And you don't have to do any of the work. You just sit there and watch them talk. So those are all teaching techniques. Let's talk about techniques that work for my program. We have a couple of mantras at SHAP that I think have really helped the culture of the program. As far as mindset mantras, I tell my kids, and they say this, they know how to finish the sentence. Strong and wrong is better than careful and correct. I tell them, I would much rather, they're afraid of embarrassing themselves or afraid of, making a mistake in front of me. I would much rather correct an aggressive mistake than try to pull the aggression out of you. And those are where those funny moments in rehearsal happen sometimes. You're playing some fast bop, bop, bop thing. You stop a little bit early and the one kid goes, honk. It's funny. Everyone laughs and the energy in the room is great. And then they're so inspired and motivated to do it again. And it shows them that failure is okay. Okay. I use the word yet. We haven't gotten it yet. I've used that word a couple times. You should use it more if you don't already. Let's talk about some SEL mantras. Okay. The 3 expectations in my class: be ready, be responsible, be respectful. Be ready involves self-awareness. I am aware that I am in class and I have my instrument out on time and I have all of these things. Okay. Being responsible, and also I'm ready to learn. Being responsible, they're managing their behavior. Don't disrupt class. Okay. Have your pencil on your stand. Being respectful, it promotes social awareness. Be nice to each other and be good to the equipment that is the school's equipment, because we don't have a budget to replace things. We is greater than me is a mantra that I say to my kids a lot. It makes them realize that we are important than just me. New member of the day is something that we do with relationship skills. We recognize kids for their strengths, and that's a student-run thing where the students are the ones seeking out the kids, and that matters a lot to those freshmen that get recognized by a senior. They feel so special when that happens. So do that if you don't already. And then the absolute foundation of my program is last rep, best rep. With relation to SEL, it means that responsible decision-making leads to preparation, i.e. practicing leads to the group sounding good. I'm running out of time here already. Oh my gosh. Maslow's mantras. We got a couple of them. I use the word yes, which promotes physical and emotional safety through a unified team approach. Do we understand? Yes. No, that wasn't, you can do better. Do we understand? Yes. They all yell. They feel like they're part of something. Okay. Whose band is this? Our band. That's how my band dismisses themselves after marching band practice in the fall, which contributes to a sense of love and belonging. They belong to something that's greater than just themselves. We do the power pose. Amy Cuddy is a dancer. She did this whole TED talk on body language. And the whole idea is that with the power pose, you'll see it on the last slide I have here. The idea is that the kids, no matter what they're feeling internally, they are projecting the most positive version of their self-esteem out to the world. This is what we do before run-throughs and marching band rehearsals. And then finally, once again, last rep, best rep. That also applies to the kids in life. They become self-actualized because through the process of their participation in my program, they gain confidence in themselves and they become more self-actualized. I tell my students on the day that they walk in that I want them to go out into the world and be leaders in whatever career path they choose to take. So, time for the coda real quick. I beat myself up a lot. Still happens. This Brene Brown quote is something that I remind myself of a lot. And if you're anything like me, then maybe you should too. Talk to yourself the way you talk to someone you love. Most of us shame, belittle, and criticize ourselves in ways we'd never think of doing to others. Okay? Be kind to yourself. So in conclusion, the idea of this presentation came about because of 2 factors. I have my own personal fear of failure, and I had a need for self-care. So we can't inspire without inspiration. We can't pour from an empty cup. And we need balance at work and at home. So despite our efforts, we will still fail along the way. So will our students. And that means we still need to take care of ourselves regardless of the failures. teach them and ourselves how to fail so we can ultimately succeed and find that balance. The head and the heart should be in balance with each other. Fine, the end. Thank you. If you have any questions, you are more than welcome to email me, nhinman@dcsdk12.org. I'm happy to talk about this more. I'm happy to share the presentation with you. Anything that I can do to help you out, I'm happy to chat. It has been an honor and a privilege to share my ideas with you today. I hope you found something useful to take back to your program. Let's continue making this the best profession there is. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your conference.